In the quiet valleys of the American West, there are stories etched not in stone, but in sacrifice. Stories that remind us of the staggering, unthinkable cost of global war. World War II demanded everything from a generation. Every town, every family sent their best. But for one couple, Albin and Gunda Borgstrom of Thatcher, Utah, the price was a burden no parents should ever have to bear. This is the story of their five sons: Quentin, Clyde, Rulon, Lloyd, and Elmer. This is the story of the Borgstrom brothers, whose service to their country resulted in a cascade of tragedy that left the nation silent and in awe of their ultimate devotion. For 5 short months in 1944, a single family offered the greatest sacrifice imaginable. The year is 1941. Before the telegrams, before the uniforms, the Borgstrom family was a picture of wholesome American life. Albin and Gunda had built their home in Thatcher, a small community nestled within Utah's beautiful Cache Valley. They were a tight-knit, hard-working family, rooted in faith and community. The five boys were typical American youths, full of energy and dreams. Quentin, the eldest, was the steady, responsible one, a young husband and father who led by example. Clyde was robust, determined, and served proudly in the U.S. Army. Rulon was known for his quiet strength and had found his calling in the Army Air Corps. Lloyd and Elmer were the younger pair, full of life and looking toward their futures. Their lives revolved around farming, church, and the simple, reliable rhythm of small-town existence. The world beyond their valley seemed a distant concern. Then, December 7th arrived. The attack on Pearl Harbor shattered that peace. Overnight, the quiet call of duty became a deafening roar. Like millions of others, the Borgstrom boys felt an immediate, unshakable urge to defend their country. One by one, they answered the call. Quentin joined the U.S. Army. Clyde joined the U.S. Army. Rulon joined the Army Air Corps, eventually serving as a mechanic crucial to the B-24 Liberator bomber operations. Lloyd, drawn to the sea, joined the U.S. Navy. And finally, Elmer, the youngest, followed his brothers into the U.S. Army. The sight of five sons marching off to war, each heading to a different theater, was a source of immense pride and, naturally, constant anxiety for Gunda and Albin. The boys were now scattered across the globe: the Pacific, the European theater, the skies, and the sea. The family's fate was now tied to the progress of the war itself. They wrote letters, loving, often censored letters, sharing jokes, asking about the crops back home, and promising to be together again soon. They were separated by thousands of miles, but bound by blood and a shared purpose. The year 1944 was a turning point for the war, bringing both hope and horror. The family's own tragedy began in the early spring. The first dreaded telegram arrived on a Saturday in March, delivered by a solemn Western Union messenger. It carried the news that Quentin Borgstrom, the eldest, had been killed in action. Serving with the Army in Europe, Quentin was killed on March 17th. The shock was immense. The family gathered to mourn, relying on their faith and their community to process the first irreplaceable loss. They tried to take solace in the fact that he died serving a noble cause. But a mother's grief knows no easy comfort. Just 10 days later, the family was bracing for the funeral when the messenger returned. This second telegram was about Clyde Borgstrom. Clyde, also serving in the Army, was killed in an accident on March 27th, only days after his brother. The twin losses, separated by a mere 10 days, were nearly unbearable. The community watched, heartbroken, as the Borgstroms buried two of their sons, side by side in the quiet Thatcher cemetery. At this point, three sons remained in harm's way: Rulon, Lloyd, and Elmer. The government and the local draft boards recognized the devastating blow. They knew the sole survivor policy existed to protect remaining family members from combat duty. Yet communications were slow, and the war effort was relentless. The tragedy, however, was far from over. It was a statistical impossibility, a cruel roll of the dice in the machinery of war. Less than 3 months after the loss of Quentin and Clyde, on June 22, 1944, came news of the third son. Rulon Borgstrom, the mechanic with the Army Air Corps, was killed in action in the European theater. Rulon's B-24, vital to the Allied bombing efforts, went down over the skies of Italy. Albin and Gunda were now parents to 3 Gold Stars. The grief was paralyzing. Yet there was still hope for 2, Lloyd at sea and Elmer, fighting with the Army overseas. Then came the summer. July passed in a terrible blur, and in August, the final blows fell. The Navy confirmed that Lloyd Borgstrom's ship, the USS Gudgeon, had been lost in the Pacific. It was a silent tragedy, the exact circumstances unknown, only that the submarine and its crew were gone. Lloyd was presumed lost on August 21st, 1944. 4 sons, 4 telegrams. But the final crushing message arrived just days later. It confirmed that Elmer Borgstrom, the youngest, had been killed in action on August 23rd, 1944 in France. 5 brothers, 5 sons. All lost within 5 months, between March 17th and August 23rd, 1944. Albin and Gunda Borgstrom stood alone. They had given everything they had to give. The sheer scope of their loss paralyzed their small community and sent shockwaves across the nation. The sole survivor policy, which should have protected the latter sons after the first loss, was tragically failed by the immense logistical chaos of a global war. The policy was in place, but the news of the first deaths had not reached the proper commanding officers in time to pull the remaining brothers from the front lines. The Borgstrom name became a solemn symbol of wartime sacrifice. Their story became a defining example of the incredible, disproportionate price paid by some families in the defense of freedom. Today, the 5 Borgstrom brothers, Quentin, Clyde, Rulon, Lloyd, and Elmer, are immortalized. They are the names on a monument in Thatcher, Utah. They are the faces in the faded photo. They are the silent, constant reminder that freedom is not free, but bought with the very best that a nation has to offer. Their story is not just one of tragedy, but one of immense courage, brotherhood, and a family's ultimate devotion to the ideals we cherish.